Start recording. Alright, so we're recording now. So welcome to the to something new, something a little different here. I'm going to be helping you live here on stream get through the basics of learning LawBreakers, some of the controller settings and things that you need for PS4 specifically. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are a little apprehensive about getting started with LawBreakers because they keep hearing about the high skill requirements and all that. And while there is a high skill ceiling if you want to be the best of the best of the best, there's only a moderately high skill floor, meaning you don't really need to be that great of a player to start playing the game and to have a good time. So I want to kind of cover some of the basic things that I've gone through and figured out and learned and been able to do using different controller settings and walking through controller settings to get things rolling. So let's do that. Let's get into a quick custom match, which is going to be an empty game, which is really the best place to start. This is where you want to go to practice, to learn the basic movements, the maps, the way your characters fire, and all the tricks and things that they can do. This is what you want to be doing. This is where you want to go to a custom game. Pick a map. It doesn't really matter which map. I kind of like Promenade. I like Mammoth. Let's go with Promenade. There's some fun things we can do in Promenade. Some fun little routes we can take. Game mode doesn't really matter at this point. We'll leave it at Overcharge. We'll set all of that just the normal way. Don't want to change any of that stuff in particular. But we'll just set that. We're going to start the match at this point and head into an empty match. It shouldn't take terribly long to get into one, since the game servers are basically going to stand up a new environment, a new lobby for us, just to get us into the game and playing as quickly as possible here. And as we get into this custom match to start playing and start learning some of the things that we can do in LawBreakers, we're going to look at first the character selection. There's a lot of different characters to choose from here. 9 different roles, really. And you have, of course, the Law and the Breakers side. There's a different character for each role on each side. So you have the same classes, the same roles on each side, but each side has a different character for that role.
5, 4.
In the beginning of playing
2,
this, I would really recommend playing somebody like Enforcer if you're coming from a first-person shooter that has kind of the standard assault rifle type class. This is a good one to start with. I don't play a lot with Enforcer, and I think Enforcer is kind of difficult to figure out some of the movement stuff, some of the really advanced movement stuff, and demonstrate all the things that are going on. There's a lot of other good classes in here, including Battle Medic with the grenade launcher, my personal favorite Titan, which has a rocket launcher, and then, you know, Assassin and Gunslinger and Wraith and Harrier and a lot of good stuff. Let's start with Wraith, which I think is one of the more advanced classes in terms of movement, but it's going to be a good character to demonstrate a lot of the movement capabilities and really the controller layout that we want to go with. So I'm going to get into the map with Wraith. And of course, the absolute basics of getting started with LawBreakers is just, you know, the left analog stick. You should be able to see it on my screen in the bottom left. I've got the little controller overlay. I'm moving around with my left analog stick. I'm using my right analog stick to aim. Pretty basic stuff. Your right trigger is going to be your primary fire. Your left trigger is going to be your alternate fire. There is no aim down sight in this game. It's something very important to understand. No aim down sight. Depending on the character that you're playing, your alternate fire is going to do something very different. In the case of Wraith, the alternate fire is going to shoot my knife. Or actually, I'm sorry, lunge with my knife. It's going to stab with my knife. We'll get to the shoot with the knife later. So that's kind of the basics of it. Your right trigger or R2, I guess, is to fire your weapon. Left L2 or left trigger is to actually do your alternate fire, which in the case of the Wraith is this knife lunge, which does some nice damage. But before we get into anything more than just this basic movement, we really need to cover the controller layout. So we're going to go into the options here. And I'm going to tell you right away, absolutely, one of the things that you need to do, if you're using a standard PS4 controller like I use, you need to set your control scheme to bumper jumper. This is critical, because if you have your control scheme set to standard, which is the default, you're going to sacrifice a lot of movement capability in this game, because you're going to have to take your thumb off of the right analog stick, the aim stick, in order to hit jump on X. And that's just not okay. You don't want to have to move your thumb off of there. So we're going to use bumper jumper. This is critical to the game for people using a standard controller, because it moves jump to L1. This is going to be a little bit confusing, a little bit difficult, a little bit strange at first. But once you get the hang of it, it's very freeing. Now, bumper jumper is not a perfect control scheme. We'll talk about the limitations of this as we get into things a little bit further. But to start with, this really is critical. You need to be using bumper jumper. So having said that, we're going to save bumper jumper. We're going to go back out here, and we're going to start looking at the controls other than the basic fire and alternate fire. So like I said a moment ago, to jump using bumper jumper, you press L1. Now, I know you're seeing a bit of a delay between me jumping on screen and me pressing the controller here. There is, unfortunately, a delay in my video, but, you get the idea, right? You press L to jump. Now, one of the one of the cool things you can do once you actually have bumper jumper set up, the reason this is important is because now I am free to continue aiming while jumping. So I can move forward, I can jump, I can aim, I can move backward, I can jump and aim. I have a lot more freedom in movement and in aim ability because I can jump and aim and move all at the same time. I'm never taking any of my thumbs off my sticks. I'm using my left index finger in order to do my jumps, and I'm using my thumbs to actually move around. This is really where the magic of LawBreakers starts, and most modern first-person shooters with any advanced movement capabilities, really. Once you have your controllers set to bumper jumper, there's a couple of other things that you really need to consider inside of your options. Well, the first thing you need to do really is just get used to having your jump on L1. Just wander around the map for a while, jumping. And with the Wraith, this particular class, there's a triple jump. If you see those blue bars, those 3 blue lines that show up next to my reticle, just to the left of it every time I jump, that is my triple jump meter. So I can do jump, 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 and in the air I get 3 triple jumps. Not just the normal ground jump plus 2 others, but normal jump, 1, 2, 3, that's triple jump in the air with the Wraith. Not all classes have that. Some classes only have a single jump off the ground. Some classes have 1 extra jump in the air, but the Wraith gets 3. Wraith also gets a wall jump, so I can hit the wall and I can bounce off of the wall, and I can do that whether or not I actually have any additional jumps left. You can hear that I'm actually hitting the wall, and I'm staying pretty much in the air the whole time here. I'm not really falling down to the ground. This is a really cool thing that you can do with Wraith. Not every class can do that, like I said. Now, a moment ago, you heard that strange sound effect, and you may have seen some distortion field around the edge of my screen. This is the second area of the game, the no gravity zone, that's going to be an important piece of movement. But we're going to get to that in a little bit. I don't want to cover that just yet, because that's one of the areas where the game really starts to require you to think differently about how you move. You're not just running around in the center, or running around in normal gravity anymore. You'll be running around in 0 gravity or limited gravity, really. But before we get there, there's one more setting, a couple more settings that you need to very seriously think about in your options. And the first one of those is going to be the stick sensitivity. Actually, right now I want to turn this music down a little bit, so I'm going to go to my audio, and I'm going to change the master music volume. I'm going to drop that down quite a ways just so you can hear me a little better. 20% should be good. Alright, so the first thing, the next control setting that you really want to think about is your field of vision. It defaults to 100, and I highly recommend it. It's a great view setting. Don't change it any lower than this. Change it higher if you want to. Have more stuff on the screen if you want to. What this really does, and we'll show you here just by looking at the screen, We're going to look right here. We see everything on screen right now, just looking where I am. You can see to the far left, I have a little bit of that blue door. To the far right, I have a little bit of those curved things outside of there. So now we'll go back in to the options, and I forgot to save my audio settings. Let me change that again real quick. Sorry. Match music volume, master music volume. Let's drop that back down to 20, just so things to be a little quieter. Save that. Okay, so now in the game, we're going to change the field of vision all the way up to 120. We're going to save that, and we're going to drop this back out of the menu. We haven't changed our position in game at all, but now you can see significantly more of the blue wavy door on the left, as well as the curved things out there on the right. This is something that you might want to consider doing. The benefit is that you can see more stuff on the screen. The detriment is that it gives you kind of this fisheye vision, and it makes things look farther away than they really are. This will put more stuff on the screen to give you more awareness, but at the detriment of having fewer pixels in the center of your screen because everything is now super squished. Like right where my reticle is, there's a little bit of text. I'm having a really hard time reading that. I think it says 91, maybe? I'm not really sure about that. So let's go back into the options. We'll change the field of vision back down to the standard 100, and we'll see what that says. Alright, I'm still having a little hard time reading it, but it's much more closely zoomed in, and I think it's going to be a little easier to read overall. It certainly is. Oh, actually, that was a part of my... that was a part of this. I'm sorry. That wasn't even on the sign. Ha! I was looking at the wrong thing entirely. But you get the point, right? It's going to dramatically decrease the number of pixels that you have in the center of your screen because it's squishing more stuff. It's taking a wider field of vision and squishing it down to fit inside of your monitor, the number of pixels that you have in your monitor. So while it does give you better field of vision, better view on the screen, it can make it a little more difficult to aim because people that are farther away are going to have fewer pixels. So pick what you want, choose what's comfortable for you, but I do recommend leaving at a minimum the field of view at 100. Don't go any lower than 100 because you're really going to put yourself at a disadvantage if you do. The next two things that you want to think about are the horizontal and vertical sensitivity of the controller sticks. I think by default it comes at like 30 or 35%. You're not going to have a good time if you leave your stick sensitivity down at whatever that default is. When I first started playing, I tried to use, I think, 45, but just to demonstrate here, I'm gonna crank this all the way back down, which is going to take a few moments because these sliders are just notoriously slow when changing things in the PS4. But we're going to change this all the way down to 35. We're going to change the vertical sensitivity as well. We're going to put this all the way back down to 35. Once we've got this back down to 35, we're going to see what that looks like. We're going to see just how quickly you can move your character around. You can change your aim. Alright, so there's 35. We're going to get out of here. I'm going to press the aim stick only, and I'm going to press it all the way to the left and all the way to the right. This is the fastest it will go. This is pretty darn slow. It takes, let's see, it'll go 1, 2, 3, okay, we'll go 0, 1, 2, about 3 seconds to completely turn around in 360 degrees. So about a second and a half in order to get you a complete 180. The advantage of a really low sensitivity is that it'll be a lot easier to track players. You don't have to move your stick nearly as much, or you can move your stick a lot more and have better tracking of players because you're able to just very slowly, very consistently, very steadily move your reticle across wherever you're aiming. So if you want to aim at this guy's head, you can practice walking around and aiming at this guy's head. As you can see right here, I'm having kind of a difficult time because I'm not used to this sensitivity setting, but I'm having to crank the stick a lot in order to keep it on his head. If you're a person that tends to overcompensate, this is a great place to start. But ultimately, you're just not going to have a good time if you have your sensitivity cranked this low because of how quickly people can move around. I'm going to demonstrate some of the movement of Wraith at this point. And as you can see, I am moving pretty darn quickly here. I'm sliding, I'm jumping, I'm hitting walls, I'm jumping off of them. I'm doing all kinds of things that make me move around the map in a very quick manner. This is going to be very difficult for you to continue to track me and aim at me if your sensitivity is really low like that, because, well, I'm just going to move faster than you're able to aim at me, and that's not going to be fun for you. So when I first started playing, I bumped up my sensitivity to 45, and I still found that to be not fast enough. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was cranking my sensitivity all the way up to 100 for both horizontal and vertical. And it was incredibly difficult for me at first. I had a really, really, really hard time making this work. But I got used to it after a while. And what I found in the end is that the incredibly high sensitivity made the game so much easier to play, so much more enjoyable. Decagon, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. So glad you could be here today. Talking about controller sensitivity at the moment and kind of getting into the basics of LawBreakers. So when I started, it was about a week and a half ago, that somebody finally convinced me to crank my sensitivity all the way up. Decagon, thank you so much for that follow. I do appreciate that. And when I got set up high sense on a controller, seriously, high sensitivity on a controller. This is important because of the movement speed of the characters. It was about a week and a half ago that I first set it up to 100. I set it to 100. I started moving around, and oh my lord, this is fast. This is dizzyingly fast, especially on the vertical movement speed. I'm looking up and down really, really, really quickly. So let's time it by doing a 360 and looking at this again. So 0, 1, I mean, that was like 1 second basically. 0, 1, 0, 1, I mean, that is incredibly fast. It's approximately 3 times faster, which makes sense compared to 35. It's approximately 3 times faster than that. 35 times 3 or 33 times 3 is 100. Close enough, right? So it is going to be approximately 3 times faster, which means you need to move your stick a lot less in order to maintain aim on whatever you're aiming at. It does make tracking significantly more difficult. But here's the deal. As I'm moving through the level, I'm playing Wraith right now, so I'm going to end up moving very quickly. One of the fastest moving players in the game at this point. So you combine my speed, my ability to move, to get around, the ability to jump, the ability to turn around, to get behind players quickly, to turn around, to be able to fire at them. And then, when you combine that with the movement of the other players, whatever character that other player is playing, if they're using Wraith, if they're using Assassin, if they're using Harrier or Gunslinger, there's a lot of very fast players in this game. And if the other players that you're fighting against are moving quickly and you're moving quickly, that 30 sensitivity, 35 sensitivity is just not going to be sufficient. You're going to have a really, really, really hard time getting your reticle back onto the players. So Decagon says, every console game you've ever played used low sensitivity, even on Titanfall 2. I 100% agree. I played the crap out of Titanfall 2 for the last 6 months, and I've got my sensitivity set to the default of 3. And for Titanfall 2, I recommend the default sensitivity of 3. It's a great sensitivity for maintaining your tracking and your accuracy. But we don't have a lot of characters really, really, really moving rapidly in Titanfall 2 the way that we do in LawBreakers. Yeah, there are characters like me doing grapple slings and with stim and everything in Titanfall 2, but it's just not the same. More often than not, you have characters that are moving fairly slowly, fairly consistently. In LawBreakers, it's a completely different game. The way this game works, the way this game aims, the way this game's aim assist works, you really, truly do need to have that high sensitivity on your controller sticks. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to aim at the characters. You're not going to be able to do a slide to get behind them and start firing at them. You're not going to be able to track them as they move across your screen rapidly. It is going to take a very, very, very long time for you to get used to the high sensitivity. And honestly, I think the vertical sensitivity should be dropped down a little bit. After playing for almost a week of the high sensitivity at 100, On the vertical, I decided to drop it down because I found that it was very difficult for me to have my vertical sensitivity set to the same as my horizontal. I want my vertical to move a little bit slower than my horizontal, primarily because there are fewer pixels on the screen. There's less vertical space, and you typically don't need to aim completely up and completely down like this as often as you need to do a 180. So moving up and moving down, put it a little bit lower. I'm going to recommend approximately a 10% drop. Whatever your horizontal sensitivity is, drop your vertical sensitivity by about 10%. I have my horizontal at 100, so my vertical is going to be at 90. If your horizontal is at 50, your vertical is going to be at 45. Just plug in an MNK if you want high sensitivity. Absolutely. High sensitivity is really only good controller with control freaks in your experience. Look what I have. I've got control freak extensions. That is actually a really good point. If you want to use the high sensitivity like this, like cranked all the way up, I do recommend having some good control freak extensions. I've got these set up. I think I have the CQB or CQS control freak extensions. I've got these on all 3 of the controllers that I own for the PlayStation. But yeah, this game is so dang fast. Otherwise, if you don't have the high sensitivity, at least higher sensitivity than you're normally used to, then you're just not going to have a good time with this game. I played for 20-30 hours of this game on a pretty low sensitivity, and it just wasn't as enjoyable as it has been since I set it to the high sensitivity. So I'm talking a lot about sensitivity at this point. I've gone on for like almost 10 minutes or so at this point, but there's other settings that you want to deal with inside of the controller setup for this game. The main one that you're gonna want to deal with next is the controller aim style, which is dual zone or single zone. It took me a while to figure out what this is. I had to ask a couple of the developers. The gist of controller aim style is basically the response curve. Dual zone response curve gives you a response curve with kind of a jump at the end here. That means that as you move your analog stick more and more as you're aiming, it's going to be relatively slow here at the beginning of your aim. It's going to let you have that fine-tune adjustment so you can track people better. Then when you get to the outer edges, the outside of the control stick, the sensitivity is actually going to jump way up. And you can see this demonstrated. By default, it is on dual zone. You can see it demonstrated not just by the amounts that you move when you're moving slowly versus moving quickly, but when you actually start moving it, there's a little bit of a delay in actually moving the reticle. It kind of starts and then expands, starts and then expands. It's got more of a jump than a linear response curve would. So let's put it back on single zone, and let's see if we can tell what the difference is. Now, it may be kind of difficult to tell what the difference is. It's hard to see a little bit, but when I move my stick, it's more of an instantaneous jump. I'm not having to go through that ramp-up speed. It's just instantaneous speed as I get to the outside of the control stick. This is really personal preference, whether or not you want the straight linear response or the angled response to get the more responsive, the more twitchy, the more, the more control at the lower stick movement. I personally prefer dual zone movement especially at high sensitivity, because I want the middle of it to be a little less sensitive. I want it to have that kind of response curve where I can do fine adjustments in the middle. Sir Baconator saying you like high sensitivity, low sensitivity can have fun. I think low sensitivity people can have fun, but it's not going to be as enjoyable because you're not going to be able to do the really cool advanced movement stuff. Dual zone's better for tracking, single zone for twitching. Absolutely, absolutely. You do just fine on default, Decuon. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do fine, but I've done both, and I think I'm not a competitive player by any means. I'm not talking about, being really competitive and hardcore with this game. I'm really just talking about, well, you're not going to be able to do the crazy advanced movement stuff quite as well as the other people, especially when you get into Assassin and Harrier. If I switch over to the Assassin character, which I think I need to destroy myself in order to do that, which is going to take a long time. Hard to kill yourself. I can jump off the map. So let me switch over to Assassin to demonstrate this further. I'm just going to jump off the edge of the map here. And I'll switch over to Assassin after I respawn. Hold square. I had already exited the spawn zone, so I couldn't hold square to do that anymore. So if I hold square at this point, I can switch over to Assassin, and I'll demonstrate what... Where did the Assassin go? I'll demonstrate what the... There it is. I can't tell these icons. Okay. I'll demonstrate the real difference in why the high sensitivity is needed for a character like Assassin. Let's say this plant right here is the enemy that I'm trying to attack. When I'm on the high sensitivity, I can track this player really easily. If they are behind me, I can very quickly turn around and start striking them. I have approximately half a second to turn around and start striking them. Now, if I'm on the low sensitivity, let's crank it back down. We'll go into the options here and crank that back down. We'll just move the horizontal sensitivity back down to like 35 or 40. Assassin needs single zone. Yep, you're probably right. Assassin probably does need single zone if you're going to be doing Assassin gameplay. But let's crank this back down. And we'll leave it on dual zone sensitivity for now. We'll put it back down to 35 where I demonstrated previously. Now, I've got the character behind me, and I can already tell a major difference. I'm trying to attack somebody. There's somebody that I know just ran behind me. I saw them run behind me. Well, okay. You know, here I am trying to get turned around in order to fight them. I run up to someone. Oops, didn't mean to drop out of there. Oh, this is so painful, getting out, turning around. This is just painfully slow. I run up to the player. Oh, they got behind me. Oh, now I need to turn around. Wait. Okay, now I'm finally turned around. Okay, now I'm turning. No. Let me turn around. Let me get him. You just can't track the players. Even if we put this on single zone sensitivity. Oops, that's not what I wanted to change it. Single zone sensitivity. I mean, I have a slightly better response curve to be able to turn around. But I'm having a really, really, really hard time. If the person gets beside me even, getting turned sideways, it makes Assassin very difficult. It makes Harrier very difficult. It even makes Wraith very difficult to have that super low sensitivity. So even at dual zone, which I think Bacon is right about Assassin needing single zone controller aim style, but even with dual zone enabled, which is what I play with all the time because I'm used to that response curve, having the Assassin cranked all the way up, having the Harrier cranked all the way up, is going to be very, very, very important. So we'll crank that back up, and now, let's say the person gets beside me. Oh, look, instantly there. And the person gets behind me. Oh, look, instantly there. It's just ridiculously fast to be able to get turned around and be able to continue hitting the enemy. My first few games as Assassin, I kept my sensitivity cranked down. I was at like 45, not even 35, but 45, where I'd been playing for a really long time. I couldn't get hits because I would run up to people and I would try to hit them and they would move and I would be stuck trying to, you know, very slowly turn around trying to get that second hit on them and they've already moved out of the way. So it was just really, really, really difficult for me to do that. So now that we're on Assassin, well, let's talk about Assassin. Let's talk about for a little bit. I've showed you a little bit of what Wraith can do, and I showed you that Wraith has those 3 bars on the side of the reticle to show you the triple jump. Well, Assassin also has those 3 bars, but as you can see, I'm not using up those 3 bars when I do my second jump in the air. I can do a double jump, but I don't have those bars being moved. Those bars for the Assassin are the alternate movement abilities, which start with, in the bumper jumper mode, pressing L3 down on the left analog stick to move with a boost. I can use up to 3 of those, but those little bars are also used for the alternate fire on the blades. The primary fire is the blades, which do some crazy cool combos, but the alternate fire, left trigger, is going to be the Grappling Hook, which allows you to essentially grapple around as if you were in Titanfall 2. You throw your Grappling Hook. When you're moving especially, you can start doing some swings, you can grab onto things, you can move around, you can fly across the map, slingshot yourself around, do really cool stuff with this. You start moving this direction, then you grapple on, and you move. It's not quite as easy to do as it is in Titanfall, You got to have forward momentum and then shoot yourself sideways in order to really do it effectively. But you can do some really cool stuff and gain some speed very quickly. The grapple also uses those little blue bars. So you have your dash, which you can do mid-air like I just showed you. But you can also do your grapple mid-air or from the ground, wherever you happen to be. 45, why am I a mod and everything now? I mean, I can take your mod privileges away if you want me to, Bacon. I think I made you a mod originally because you were trying to post some link or some caps, and I was annoyed with Nightbot blocking you, but yeah. So the Assassin's movement is pretty darn epic. It takes a lot more coordination between your grapple and your dashes. You have to think more about which one you want to use in the appropriate situation. The grapple can also be used to grab onto enemies and pull you to them. You can use your dash in order to get behind people, quickly turn around and slice. But this again points back to the need to have a higher sensitivity on your controller layout. Without that high sensitivity, you're just going to have a less effective play style than you would with the lower sensitivity. Alright, so I've covered a lot with field of view, controller sensitivity, setting up the controller. These are really the things that I think are critical to getting into LawBreakers. Set your controller to bumper jumper. This is really, really, really important. If you just have a standard PlayStation 4 controller like I'm using here, bumper jumper. If you have a modified controller or a scuff controller, I still wouldn't recommend standard. I would recommend tactical in that case. Tactical I found was really good when I was playing with my modded controller. I do have a modded controller that has extra buttons on the bottom here, but the way I stream, I'm using PS4 Remote Play app on my laptop, so I need to have my controller plugged into my laptop, and I can't plug in my modified controller to my laptop. Every time I do, it shorts out the USB system. It's what you get from modding your own controllers, right? Shorting out the USB system when you plug it in. But bumper jumper. This is an important control scheme setup. You need to be using bumper jumper with your standard controller layout. You need to have a higher sensitivity than you're used to. Bacon, you're using default. I feel sorry for you, man. How do you aim while jumping at the same time? You can't. I mean, you have to take your fingers off in order to jump. You move your thumb off of there in order to jump. Unless you're doing some crazy controller holding thing where you have your fingers down here, which for me, that doesn't work. I mean, if you can do this, if you can curl your fingers around and do that and actually be accurate and responsive, more power to you. I'm old. My fingers don't do that. They don't move in that direction. It's because you're the best. You are the best, Bacon. That's the truth. No one can deny that. But there's some cool little grapple Spider-Mans. Alright, what was I talking about? Alright, I was reviewing things. Yes. Review. Bumper jumper, highly recommended. Controller layout, controller sensitivity, highly recommend you use something significantly higher than you're used to. If you don't want to crank it all the way up to 100, I completely understand. Drove me nuts how difficult it was to learn to play this game again when I cranked up the sensitivity. If you don't want to put it up to 100, put it at 75. Put it at 65. Do something higher than you're used to and get used to that. And then a week later, crank it up a little more. A week later, crank it up a little more. Do drop your vertical sensitivity a little lower than your horizontal. Approximately 10% is a good place to start. Maybe you want it a little lower than that, a little higher than that. But 10% I think is a pretty good number because there are just fewer pixels on the screen vertically, and you don't often need to look at the ground and then look straight up. Yeah, you want to look ahead of you and then look up, but you don't need super high sensitivity to go 45 degrees or 90 degrees or, 45 degrees, 90 degrees there. So, yeah, there you go. That's kind of my getting started with controller and movement inside of LawBreakers. I've talked a lot for the last, 30 minutes or so here, but I think if you're getting into a high skill, fast-paced shooter, if I could talk correctly, a high-skill, fast-paced shooter like LawBreakers, on PlayStation 4 specifically, then these recommendations are really going to help you play a lot more effectively long term than using the defaults that the game comes with. It's one of those games where the controller layout, the sensitivity really does matter. Ultimately, getting used to the way that you have your controller set up, getting used to the settings that you use, that's going to be more important than the specific settings. But if you can just work through the frustration and pain and learning curve of the settings that I've recommended, I think you're going to have a lot more effective gameplay overall. Anyways, thanks for watching this. Thanks YouTube for checking out this video. If this was recorded, or this was recorded live on Twitch. I'm actually going to go play some games right now on twitch.tv/CodeNinjaGaming. So be sure to check out the Twitch channel, YouTube. For everybody in the chat right now, thanks for being here. I will be getting onto some games in a moment. Just wanted to cover all of this quickly inside of a live tutorial and demonstration of the controller layout that I use and why I recommend these settings. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming.